very big resistance, and the reason is it's usually parents or family members of people who have been killed in terror attacks and expect the people who killed their sons and daughters to spend the rest of their life in jail, and then suddenly a year after they are released in order to bring somebody back. It is I think, the hardest decision that the prime minister can take because they're responsible for everybody's safety. And yet when you send your boys and girls to the army, you expect as a soldier that the government would do everything possible to bring you back if you fall captive as part of your duty. The problem is, of course, that the other side sees this as weakness, and then they have incentive to kidnap more and more soldiers because they get their prisoners released, or get more money in ransom because you caved into terror, and caving into terror always brings about more terror. But I would say to the people resisting, put yourself in those shoes. If it's your daughter there, if it's your son there, wouldn't you want the government to do everything possible to bring them back? Well, it's if you see the show, you'll see I deal with this very much in the show. They're unfairly carry this burden on their shoulders. Gilad Shalit came back almost 5 years ago, I think, after spending 5 years with Hamas. Ever since he came back, 1,600 dangerous terrorists were released for his release. Ever since then, whenever a bus explodes in Israel, whenever there is a terror attack, whenever something horrible happens, you read in the paper that these three terrorists that were released in the Gilad Shalit deal did this. This woman was stabbed by this terrorist who was released in the Gilad Shalit deal. I just imagine this kid opening the paper and reading this and carrying that guilt on his shoulders. How can you do that? So but there is no easy solution because they're all right. They're all right. It was an actual occurrence, but not with the wife. There is a prisoner of war who is very close to me now, very dear to me. He was part of the research. His name is Ishai, and he spent 5 years. Thank you. He spent 5 years in captivity at the Abu Jibril terrorist organization in Lebanon. He was tied to a radiator for 5 years. Okay. For the first 4 years of his captivity, the army thought he was dead. They wouldn't release that he's alive. So everybody thought that he's just gone. And they sold him from one terrorist organization to the other the right to interrogate him. So every few weeks, somebody would come in and torture him again to get secrets from him. Ishai did not say a word. He did not talk. He did not betray the country, not once, until Chezi was an Iraqi Jew, so he spoke Arabic. And one day, this is after years in captivity, he heard the guards outside of his door talking about him, saying, poor guy doesn't know that his mother in Israel passed away. And that he broke down completely. And when he came back to Israel, his mother was alive and well. But they would play these games on them. They would dress them up and shave them and get them ready to tell them there's a prisoner swap and that they're going home, and that they would drive them around the block and throw them again in that hole. And they did many things that were way worse than the physical torture. Oh, just didn't get it because it's an Israeli expression. Whenever something is fancy and big, and you say, "Ooh, it's like America." The idea was that in the 17 years that they have been absent, Israel has turned into a different place. That where there were small houses, now there's skyscrapers and malls. And Israel, in the 20 years that I'm depicting it, has turned from an almost socialist country to a very advanced, progressive, high-tech hub, a very modern. So when these people come back, they're like, you don't recognize it. It's like America. Sorry for the bad translation.
There was some dialogue that I found interesting, like when the prisoner of war commented about his wife gaining weight. Made me wonder, were there particular scenes in this episode or dialogue that directly came from your time you spent with these prisoners?
I'm sure there was, not the gaining weight one. But in that scene, one of my biggest fights with the network that aired this was it seemed unfathomable to them that a prisoner of war who was just released would want to drive the car and would drive the car. And I don't know why I was so stubborn about it. I'm like, it feels right to me, it feels right to me. About a week after we shot the scene, all the actors and me met with a prisoner of war who came back after 11 years. And he said that the meeting with the family was so overwhelming that he whispered to his wife, "Do you have the car keys?" And he ran away, and the first thing he did was drive home on his own. So I think the meeting with them kind of informed a psychology that brought about many truths to the... Well, the differences were because it's a different culture. So whereas here in Israel, we all go to the army, and it's very personal to us, and there's a lot of suspense in Uri's story of the wife cheating on him. There's a lot of suspense in Nimrode's story, suddenly being in the house with a complete stranger. We took all of those and turned them into one Brody in order to have more room for Saul and Carrie's characters. Because we knew that once the Brody story is over, they'll have to continue the series without them.
Right.
But, and I think it's more of a straight thriller here. Whereas in Israel, it was more of a deep character exploration of what happens to these people. There's also, some of the differences were very easy. Israel negotiates for the return of prisoners of war, so it starts with the return after 17 years of negotiating. Americans don't negotiate, or at least not officially, so Brody is released in a military operation. Another difference is that everybody knows prisoners of war in Israel, so these men come back broken, truly broken. Nobody can suspect that they've been really turned and that they can do any damage. But in order to buy that Brody is a threat, he comes back pretty buff after 8 years in captivity. And you don't know if it's because he was really captive or not captive. It was appropriate for the American show. But in the Israeli show, they're hiding a secret. You don't know what the secret is, but you don't really think that they're terrorists. Because they're broken.
We were able to keep the end of season 1's big twist secret?
Yes.
What was the reaction?
I was really afraid that Homeland would come out before Prisoners of War, because in Homeland we made that already in the second episode.
Yeah, you do that early on.
Yeah. So the big cliffhanger in the Israeli series was not known to the actors or to the network before we shot it. And when the actors were sitting the scene happens in a car, and they're sitting and they're listening to a CD, and I was sitting in the back and reading to them what they're listening to, and they were shocked. So we got that.
You got the real
and
shock.
I was really afraid of the scripts in the network. Israel is, a small country with many Jews. They all talk. It's bad for safety.
Right.
So I kept it very close to the chest.